So the punch is obviously a rotary movement. We're incorporating a lot of rotation through the body to generate power. The main centres of rotation should be the hips and pelvis and the upper back or the thoracic spine. In terms of our hip motion, as we're throwing the punch, our front hip is moving into internal rotation. The back hip, whilst internally rotating in relation to the ground, because we have the pelvis rotating on top of the hip, it's actually moving into a relative hip external rotation. For most fighters, the main hip range of motion restriction will be that internal rotation range on the front leg. And there's a number of interventions that we can incorporate to try and maximise this range.
Hip internal rotation range of movement may also respond to an inferior glide of the hip joint, as demonstrated previously in relation to hip flexion mobility. And this may also be performed as a mobilisation with movement. So again, we'll be working on the left hip. So wrapping a strap around the top of the hip joint and then placing the foot of the opposite leg in the strap, and from there exerting a strong downwards pressure with the right leg while actively moving the left hip into internal rotation. Pulling down and then passively rotating or actively rotating the left hip. We can perform an active stretch into hip internal rotation, and one example of a position where we can do this is in sitting. So basically sitting with the feet approximately 1.5 hip widths apart and the knees bent to approximately 70 to 90 degrees of knee flexion. From there, keeping the pelvis relatively stable, we're performing a hip internal rotation movement by bringing the knee down towards the floor and then back in the other direction. Knee down towards the floor and back in the other direction. Just making sure that we're not rotating the pelvis excessively. We want to keep the pelvis relatively fixed, so isolating that stretch to the hip.